Good morning and welcome everyone to our May Coffee Talk. We are so happy to have you here this morning, and we have a fascinating program this morning with Maxine Clark and Delmar DivINe. I'm Susan Katzman. I'm the other half of the duo with Lisa Gubernick, our Vice President of Membership, and I am the immediate past president for NCJW St. Louis. Coffee Talk started almost 2 years ago. July will be 2 years. We started as a way to get people engaged and to connect members and friends during COVID. And we've had requests to continue our programs and our work. So that's what we've been doing. And we have had many of you on the screen have been with us before. We have a variety of topics that we cover. And today is no different. We have been wanting to talk about Delmar DivINe for some time, but knew that Maxine was very engaged in getting it up and running. So we thought we'd wait until things had calmed down, maybe just a tiny bit, and we could capture her for an hour. So this is our Coffee Talk. Coffee Talk is wide open for people to join us. We charge nothing, as you know, and we are also always open to suggestions that you might have for other guests that you'd like to hear. So be sure and reach out to me, reach out to Lisa or the NCJW office for that. I am really pleased to be introducing Maxine Clark. I've known and been interacting with Maxine for some time. She is a member of NCJW. She is on the board of numerous local and national boards, you know, including History Museum, including Channel 9, and does so much around entrepreneurship, so much help start KIP, the KIP program in the schools in the St. Louis area. I can't think of much that's going on in the community, maybe not the soccer team. I can't think of too much in the community that Maxine is not engaged in. And I guess one of the things I admire most about her is so often her engagement is not always out front. Very often when you dig deeper into things, you find Maxine is very quietly behind the scenes, helping to shape what is happening in the community, particularly as she works with her husband, Bob Fox, but also very much on her own behalf. Delmar DivINe, and I don't want to tell that story, we're going to let Maxine tell that. It's been her vision and her dream. And in order to tell those stories today, what we're going to do, we have a video that PBS took, and we're going to share that first in just a minute. And then Maxine will talk about Delmar DivINe and some of the challenges that she has had putting that project together, what that project means to St. Louis, what it's doing to that part of the city, and, you know, potentially what it could do from a development standpoint for the rest of the St. Louis metropolitan area. So we'll be hearing from Maxine, and then, as we always do, please either put your questions in the chat or around 9:10, 9:15, 9:05, we'll stop so that we can take questions from you. So that'll be our approach today. If we're good, and I want to thank Brooke Wallace for helping us out. in our production, as she always does. Let's go ahead and share the PBS video on Delmar DivINe. And Maxine, thank you again.
You're welcome.
This building started out more than 100 years ago as St. Luke's Hospital. It used to be just one of the many busy places on what was once one of the city's busiest streets, Delmar Boulevard. It's always been a natural north-south border between neighborhoods. But in recent years, those neighborhoods have been increasingly defined by race and economics. It's a barrier not easily crossed, the so-called Delmar Divide. But now this big building is coming back as a place called the Delmar DivINe. It's the vision of Maxine Clark, a high-energy doer of things. She served on numerous boards, including 9 PBS, and has brought her skills to building businesses and communities.
I have many titles. I'm probably best known as the founder of Build-A-Bear Workshop, but in this project, I'm the Chief Inspirator of the Delmar DivINe and the president of our board of directors.
It's a place that's bringing together nonprofit organizations addressing all kinds of neighborhood and community needs.
Yeah, well, hey, welcome to Delmar DivINe. You're right here in the main entrance. This is the main entrance to the nonprofit office buildings where everybody who's a visitor...
Jorge Riapedre, who used to run the Immigrant and Refugee Health Care Center Casa de Salud, is now the executive director of the Delmar DivINe.
At the end of the day, the thing we're providing is space and ancillary services for over 30 nonprofit organizations here in the region. We're providing this space so that, number one, we can create a platform from which the nonprofits can better collaborate together, therefore maximize the availability of the dollars and, in fact, their expertise.
If that sounds a lot like what Cortex is doing for technology and research in Midtown, you're right. In fact, this is where Maxine Clark got the idea.
Why don't we do this, for nonprofits? I was traveling around working with a lot of nonprofits, and especially after I left, retired from Build-A-Bear, and everybody was all over the place, and nobody was really working together. And so it seemed to me that if we could create a space similar to Cortex, we could really work together better.
The construction is ongoing and probably will continue to be ongoing.
It will be ongoing through June. At the end of June, the apartments and the unfinished conference room spaces should all be done.
Yeah. It's a big job at a very big building that you'd never now guess was a hospital, and it would have been easy to get lost if I hadn't had a guide. This was a gut rehab.
Correct.
But this looks like something you kept.
This is original to the hospital building, and Maxine Clark is going to refurbish it. It won't be a working phone, but it'll get it back to its original luster so that people can appreciate the history of the building.
I feel like all the reporters should be rushing to the phone to call in the verdict. Yeah, that's great. That's nice. He took us to the offices of the largest new tenant, BJC's Behavioral Health Response. It's not a clinic. They go into the community to provide mental health services, including the Cops and Clinicians program, which sends mental health professionals out with St. Louis police officers on certain calls. Their offices were relocated here from Creve Coeur.
And so coming down to the city has been fabulous for us.
But President and CEO Pat Coleman says it's not just the geographic location. It's the very concept of the place. The other nonprofits providing other kinds of community services around health, education, economic development.
Exactly. And so that is another reason why it's important to be here, because we get the opportunity, again, to collaborate, to talk to one another, to work side by side with all of the services that's needed in our community.
This is not the only thing happening north of Delmar. There are plans, for example, to turn the old Hodemont streetcar right-of-way just north of Delmar into a greenway, a linear park that will run through 6 neighborhoods. When we did a story with Great Rivers Greenway about the plans, we were joined by Kevin Bryant, who was advising on the project, but is also a developer here.
So there's always a lot of talk about the Delmar Divide, and this represents a connecting point to offset that. So with the Central West End, which is basically 100 yards from here, you have one of the highest valued real estate tracts in St. Louis. And just 100 yards north, one of the poorest. But what you have now is major investment going in Fountain Park, and the Greenway becomes the connecting point between the two. And I'm surprised every time I speak to someone who never even noticed this park. Yeah. Whoever never even noticed these homes. And these homes were built the exact same time as the homes of the Central West End.
Maxine Clark knows the history, loves the history of Delmar Boulevard and the old neighborhoods north of Delmar.
At the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, this was a prosperous immigrant neighborhood. And I don't mean prosperous by rich people, although there were big houses around here, meaning there were lots of jobs. 45 delis between Martin Luther King, or Easton at the time, and Delmar, bakeries, meat markets. It was a real hub of activity, and I think we can do it again.
So, what we're doing here is extremely important, but also what Maxine's vision is to make sure that the entire project has tangible value for people who live north of Delmar Boulevard.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to reach, I mean, you're not just sitting in a building.
Correct.
You've got to connect, bring in the community.
Absolutely
and
correct.
be part of it.
That's right. And
that could be the hardest challenge, though, in my mind.
It is. But one of the principal ways we're doing that is with this space right ahead of us, about 7,000 square feet, and it's our multi-purpose community room. In that space, which is going to have state-of-the-art technology in it around video conferencing and high-speed internet, any group that's working north of Delmar Boulevard will be able to reserve this for no money and come in and have events, community meetings, etc. So that they have a space here that's theirs. It's not usable by the tenants. It's strictly for the community north of Delmar. And we're also going to be running some programs that address community-identified needs, such as older adult enrichment and after-school program for students.
Have you gotten any pushback from the community? It's like, here come the white do-gooders again, or, you know, that sort of thing. There has to be some skepticism, perhaps.
Yes, I think there was a lot of skepticism at first because lots of people have come into these neighborhoods and said they were going to do X, Y, and Z. And I think they thought I'd be long gone by now, but they didn't know me very well. And I've made friends with people. People trust me, and I think they're still questioning whether it's doable. You know, like, will this last? How are you funding it so that it'll last forever? Like, or is this going to be something that'll be empty in 10 years again? That's, you know, what we're working towards is really sustainability, not just because we'll raise enough money for that, but because we'll have the people that will be renting here, whether they're in the apartments or the offices or the retail, will be thriving because there's enough people all around here to make that happen. And also, when you have a restaurant, when you bring some food, places for people to eat, they come across the street. I think that we're going to see the real revitalization of this incredible neighborhood and an appreciation for Delmar. And our goal isn't just to make Delmar better. Our goal is to also help connect this to Page Avenue, to Olive, and then Page, and all the streets in between, that we can make sure that the neighborhoods are all getting better and better because the people want them to. They just didn't have a place to start.
For Living St. Louis, I'm Jim Kircher.
Thank you for showing
Maxine?
that. Yeah, I'm ready.
All yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for showing that video. It was taken in the winter. You could see the snow on the ground, and a lot has changed even since in those last few months. But looking at it from my perspective this morning, I'm always incredibly proud of what we've accomplished together as a community. And I'll tell you a little bit about this story because I'm not from St. Louis. I came here in 1976. I was transferred by the May department stores, and my first home was in Lafayette Square. And I loved the history of St. Louis. I had a house that I bought for $80,000 that I would have had to pay $8 million for in Washington, D.C. or somewhere close. And so I thought, why aren't all these homes filled? Why aren't people living here? And people would ask me at work, why are you living in the city? Like, aren't you afraid? And I didn't have any fear. I was never afraid. I loved doing the history, the research of the people that lived in my house. And over time, I found that St. Louis was full of all of this richness, a history that was one to be proud of, even though most people, sort of talked about it in hush-hush tones. I came from Coral Gables, Florida, which was a city of lots of Spanish history, but not necessarily the kind of history American history that I was really looking for. And I found it here. My work in the May Company, working for Stanley Goodman, who really was a phenomenal philanthropist and artist and truly a Renaissance man, allowed me to see that you could work hard and make a good living and create a company that could also give back to the community. And that's also what I did at Build-A-Bear. And what I cared about and how I got to where I am today is because of my education. And one of the things that Susan and I always talk about is education. And I know that it's different today because we're training kids for a different world, but I was so thankful to my teachers. And one of the projects that you heard her mention that I worked on was the opening of the KIPP schools here in St. Louis. And we were opening our first elementary school, our second school in 2014 in this neighborhood, the 63112 neighborhood. And I landed here for a meeting, and I was talking to one of the neighbors, and he said to me, "Hey, Maxine, why don't you drive around? Maybe you'll see a house you like, and you and your husband will move here." And so I took a right turn instead of a left, and I saw on my way up Maple to Belt that this building, they were just nailing in the for sale sign. And I wondered what could happen to it. So Brooke, why don't you put the slides up, and I'll just sort of take you through the story so you'll know a little bit more about this neighborhood. So get up there on the screen. So you saw a few of these pictures in that program, but what I found here when I immediately did the research was that this building had been built in 1904 for the World's Fair, not for the World's Fair, but as part of the growth in St. Louis of the World's Fair. And right next door, just really a block away, was Jewish Hospital, which was on just a couple doors down until 1926 when it moved to you can keep going to the next slide. You can get there. So this was, go back one. That's Jewish Hospital that was right there on Delmar from 1906. I think they built it till 1902 till 1926. And the middle building was the first hospital, and they built the other two buildings aside. And then the next slide will show you St. Luke's Hospital, and you can see the horse and buggies, pulling up to the hospital. They look sort of similar. They were a similar design, the hospitals. It's hard to imagine you coming up to the hospital in a horse and buggy, but as I show you these slides, you'll see when we built this hospital, or when they built this hospital, there were no cars. So they didn't have to worry about parking lots or any of those things. To the right there was the nursing school. Next slide, please. This was the front of the hospital when it was completely finished in around 1910. And it was a stately building. That building, 100% of that building is still there. They just built around it, cut and pasted, which is one of the wonderful things about it. One of the challenges of a construction project is finding all these historic buildings. Next slide, please. And this is one of the buildings that the first hospital is built into an E shape. And this is one of the E's, the long part of the E coming out, which had hospital rooms in this as well. It was torn down and rebuilt to look exactly like it. So I'm not sure why they tore it down. Must have been some kind of construction flaw. Next slide. So this is an aerial view of the campus in 1952. And again, you can see that there are a lot of houses around there. And on the future slides, you'll see they're not. They built one parking lot behind the hospital there, which was pretty much the doctor's parking lot. Still, people were coming to visit people on the streetcars. The Hodemont tracks was just a few blocks behind us. And it still amazes me that people could live on one side of those tracks and go to sleep at night listening to the trains or the streetcars going by. But these were, beautiful apartments. Very much the idea in the mid 30s and 40s was living in an apartment. Maybe some of those were owned by one of the persons that owned the building, lived there, and then they rented out the other apartments. And in talking to many of the people that we interviewed for the project, including Ken Kransberg, he told me most everybody, he didn't know anybody that lived in a house. Most everybody lived in an apartment. And you didn't think of it as an apartment or a house. It was just the way people lived. So that's the slide of 1950. 52. Let's go to the next slide. And there's a hospital room. Can you imagine being in a hospital room like this? It brought back memories. I remember going to visit my mother in the hospital one time when she had a surgery, and it was this teeny tiny room, and I couldn't wait to get out of it. And that was in Miami, Florida. So I guess this was a hospital style. But next slide. And there's the hospital in 1960, and you can see that we built a lot more parking lots, or they built a lot more parking lots. And what they did is they took back the property on an eminent domain. St. Luke's bought up the property and tore down the buildings to build parking lots, which, even though I don't like that idea, the idea that they needed cars for the patients and the doctors to visit, but you can still see there was quite a bit of housing back there. And even on the left side there, the apartments, those were owned by John DivINe told me those were his father's property, and his father sold it to the hospital so they could build the rest of the parking lot. Everybody has an attachment to this hospital, whether you were Jewish, Presbyterian, Episcopalian. So many people were born here. I rarely meet somebody that doesn't have a little bit of a story to tell me. And on the right-hand side, there was the old nursing school, which they tore down. And you'll see in the next slide how fast it was changing. Next slide, please. And there's the hospital pretty much the way we bought it. It didn't change much from 1968 to 2014, but still those apartments were over there on the parking lot. And they built sort of a new sort of facade on the front of the hospital, which was really ugly and awful. We had to tear that down. But at least you can see this is pretty much the way the hospital stayed for the next several decades. Next slide. So this is what I bought. I bought 10 buildings, about 9 acres. It had gone from being St. Luke's Hospital to being regional hospital to being Connect Care. And in 2014, they finally realized they could not make this work. And so they closed it down and put it up for sale. The city owned it by this time because of all the change of hands, and it was put up for sale. And that's exactly the way it looked in 2015 when I bought it. And you can see that the hospital in the front was built in 1961, and the hospital in the middle was the 1904 hospital, and the building on the right, which is our offices, where the doctor's office is built in 1962. Still changing. Keep going, sorry. And this is what it almost looks like today. They finally took down our walls, our construction walls, and you're starting to see the building as it will look. You can see that we recovered the original portico of the 1961 hospital, which is still considered historic, and we're restoring that. And there'll be a driveway that drives you up to the hospital the way it originally was when you saw those horse and buggies there. So we're restoring that. And basically, this was a mid-century building, so it fits in any time zone, and it fits now. It'll be all painted and cleaned up. And on the main floor of that building will be retail. That will be St. Louis Community Credit Union, Greater Health and Wellness Pharmacy, the first Black-owned pharmacy to be opened in St. Louis in about 4 decades. And then Edward Jones office, the first Edward Jones office north of Delmar in a long time. So we're very excited about that, because I think part of the prosperity of this neighborhood will come from having St. Louis Community Credit Union and the investment office of Edward Jones there, neither of which existed in this neighborhood. There's no bank anywhere close that I've been able to find. And there was one, a Commerce Bank down in the Loop, that closed a few years ago. So where do people go? They just put it in their mattress? How do you expect people to go to prosperity if they don't have a way to really put their money to work? And so we're part of that too. And then also, because you heard the story about the delis and the meat markets and the restaurants that were there, we're opening a deli. The Delmar DivINe will open probably in spring of 2023 now, because we've had some materials delay and all the refrigeration and things like that he needs to open it. But right in that little building in the middle, you'll walk in and there'll be the Delmar DivINe, and there'll also be outdoor eating. So we're very excited about this, because food and restaurants bring people together, but it was also a trademark of this neighborhood. And a little bit of my Jewish roots coming through. Most of the people that live here, the Black families that live here now, those were almost gone by the time they got here. They don't remember them, but everybody's thrilled to have it. And they're thrilled that we're telling a story about a neighborhood that was multicultural and exactly brought so many wonderful people together. I think there's a couple more slides, I'm not sure. Is there another slide after this? So this is the whole campus when we're done. On the left there is phase 2, and that actually is technically what was the nursing school and the nursing gym. And while we don't have an exact plan for it yet, I'm thinking that maybe it could be a really interesting campus for early childhood providers. Everybody could rent a floor, and they could share all of the cafeteria, the gym, the playground, all the things that other things that are shareable in the building, rather than paying to build all these schools all over St. Louis. The only negative is that they all would be in the city of St. Louis, so anybody could come to them, but they wouldn't be spread out across the community as they are. They would still be where they are now, but they're just an idea, because St. Louis was the home of the first kindergarten, and we know that early childhood is a big challenge for our workforce and for our community and for our children. And what if we could do something that nobody else had done and put our efforts behind bringing them to a central location where everybody could bring their kids? And we know that people bring their kids to UCC Childcare and Urban Sprouts and all the other good early childhood centers all around the community, even if they don't live in the city of St. Louis. So it's a very central location, easily accessible. And it may be, it's just an idea. It's a working idea at this point, not definite. But our tenants, you can go to the next slide. So this is the corner of Delmar and Belt. Our bus stop that was there is being totally redone. That's not what it's going to look like. It's going to be better than that, but it'll be totally heated, Wi-Fi, comfortable seating, a great place for people to catch the bus, because public transportation is really important. And we're on the Delmar main line here. You can get anywhere within, about 25 or 30 minutes on the bus. here in the Delmar line. So we're really excited about that. And of course, the Metro has 2 stops, one in the Loop and one on Forest Parkway. So we really are right in the center of all kinds of transportation that would make it much better for our future if people use public transportation. But you can kind of see into where those shops are there. And the best is yet to come. We're full. We only have 1 space left to rent in our offices. Our apartments open August 1st, and those apartments were designed for, it's called workforce housing, for teachers, nurses, social workers, public health, public safety, those young people that make that 35 to 55,000 that really cannot find a place to live in St. Louis or any city in America right now. It's quite difficult. These are priced to be about 30% of their salary, which is what workforce housing is. And we're very excited. They're all modern, all electric appliances, including washer dryers in every apartment, a dog park, a swimming pool, a gym. You can't build apartments like that, but imagine this was a hospital with those little teeny tiny rooms that you saw at one time, and now it will house young people, which is one of the opportunities we have in this neighborhood. We have a wonderful community of older citizens, but we really want to bring young people here because there is so much property to buy, houses to restore, wonderful real estate and housing stock, and we just need some young people to perk it up. We also have the students all at WashU and the medical students at WashU School of Medicine. Yes, there is a fitness center there too. There is a gym, and that's open to the apartments and to the office space. But there's a swimming pool. The swimming pool is only open to the apartments because I just really didn't want to see all my fellow workers in their swimsuits every day. I thought that would be a little bit, odd. But the swimming pool will be there for the tenants. There's a club room. There's all those kind of conveniences. In our office space, which is what I really want to talk to you about, we're full. We only have 1 space left, and we have several people eyeing it right now. But we have about 1/3 of our tenants are education, 1/3 are health and mental health, and 1/3 are community development. And what's really intended for this building, we have a ton of public spaces, of which all of them are not open yet. But every floor has its own conference room, its own a pantry, a microwave, a refrigerator, a little area to use for storing your food if you want to eat in there. And then also has bathrooms. And then on the main floor, we have a wide variety of different sizes of rooms, including an auditorium that will be open to all of our tenants to use no additional cost. So in that main floor, we'll have our Schnucks Family Collaboration Cafe, which will be a grab and go kind of cafe. We have courtyards. We have so you can go outdoors even when you're indoors. We've got the gym. Everything's on the main drag of this concourse, which was the main hall of the old original hospital built in 1904. So it's a little bit wider because the gurneys used to go down the hallway. It's beautiful now. Hard to imagine it was ever a hospital. Every day it's changing, but we're getting close to being able to have this totally turned over to us. Where you see those people sitting there on the parking lot, that's where the outdoor eating for that cafe is going to be. So it'll be really wonderful to have this in the neighborhood. And I know that how popular delis are in St. Louis. People will be coming from all over St. Louis for breakfast or lunch to eat at the Delmar DivINe. And the developer of the restaurant is Ben Paremba from Elia and Olio. Ben did a lot in his restaurants to perk up the Tower Grove area. And he wants to do the same over here. And that's what you need is people who are willing to take a risk. And Ben is doing that. So our tenants are, there are the apartments have, we have 10 studios and then about 90 1-bedrooms and the rest are 2-bedrooms. They're small, but they're not New York small. They're just small and compact, but they're very efficient. And the 2-bedrooms have 2 baths, so they're meant to be 2 adults or 2, students could share, medical students or nursing students or teachers. Teachers oftentimes in St. Louis came to St. Louis and they would live 10 to a home that they could rent in the city of St. Louis. But we're really excited about being able to provide all of this shared space and shared amenities. And the other thing that was really the intention of the building was to bring people together who would work together. And we've had most of us have only been there since January, but I would say that we've had a lot of wonderful collisions in the hallways where people can now just go downstairs and say, oh, I want to go talk to Teach for America, or I want to go talk to Lisa Greening at Turn the Page St. Louis. How do I navigate schools? Or we're talking about so much talk about mental health. We have Mental Health America and BHR. They said in the video that BHR was a part of BJC, but they're not. BHR is totally different. This is the last slide. So I'm ready to open up for any questions to anyone that you might have that maybe many of you remember this hospital, you've been in it before. Hopefully you have some fond memories as well as maybe some that are some good questions about urban development.
There are a few questions in the chat. I think you did say you will have a gym.
Yes.
And how do you screen and recruit for potential tenants for the apartments?
Well, we're just starting the marketing campaign, but we've reached out to all the school districts, to all the nursing schools, because the nursing schools don't have dormitories, as you probably know, here in St. Louis. The medical school does have some housing for their medical students, but we are reaching out to the medical students. We're reaching out to the law students, a lot of young professionals, but it's designed for teachers, nurses, social workers, public health, public safety, and grad students who don't usually make any money. They're usually paying their way through. So that's the marketing strategy. But we're an equal, it's open to anyone that would be able to pass the affordability test to live here.
Okay. And that was another question about how, can anyone live there? And with the community room, you spoke about the community room, or they had that on the clip. Would that be available for other nonprofits to hold events?
No, that's only for the community. Our conference center will be opened for the public to use, but our priority is to our tenants of the building, and they already have it booked up pretty much for when it opens up in August. They have it booked up pretty much during the fall, but it will be available if it's open. We will make it available, rent it. There's not a supermarket. I see Nancy's question, yeah. And not a supermarket, but Ben's opening a mini market. He has those next to his restaurant. Sometimes he's opening up a mini market, but right on de Bolivar in the Expo Apartments, Fields Markets is opening up a grocery store. It's just a few blocks away. So very, very convenient.
Okay. And then did you see Betsy Schmidt is asking, is there programming to bring the larger community together with the professional tenants?
Yes, yes. We are starting in the fall. We haven't developed a name for it, but our version of Venture Cafe, which will be open to the nonprofit community with various topics and speakers and breakout rooms and opportunities for people to come to the Delmar DivINe is intended to be a hub for nonprofits, whether you live here, work here, or are part of the nonprofit community in our area. We have to work together. We have 14,488 nonprofits in St. Louis. While I don't think that any of them are doing any harm, they're not doing enough good. And I think we have a real opportunity to work together and to bring people together. One of the biggest parts of our makes us unique and why it was such a desirable place for people to live as office tenants is the Center for Human Services Leadership. One of my frustrations as a member of the board of many, many nonprofits was seeing the turnover that exists in nonprofits. And almost always, somebody's just robbing from Peter to pay Paul. You steal one from another organization and then they have a hole in there. And it's never the next person in line that gets that job. They have to go outside, conduct a search. And I realize we're keeping search firms in business, but in business, if you didn't have succession planning, you'd be out of business. Mm-hmm. And so we really want to help. And so the Center for Human Services Leadership, which is actually run by the Brown School, and Barry Rosenberg is running that. We are already have had over the last 2 years, even though we were doing it remotely, really many, many wonderful classes of professional development for our tenants. One was called Managing from the Middle, which really is one of the first courses to help people in middle management in nonprofits to move up the ladder. These are for our tenants. These are definitely for our tenants. And then I heard in the elevator, two young girls were talking about, one of them said, I thought I came to work for a nonprofit. And the other one said, you did. And she said, well, why are we always talking about money? And, they clearly didn't know what, that it all is about, we have to fund these. So we immediately went to work and we created a class called Inside the Nonprofit, which everyone loved, even the people that were much more experienced in nonprofits. So having Barry on our team is really helpful. We can move really quickly to create a course. Yesterday, we had all of the leaders in our building in a course on purpose and branding with Larry Zarin, who came in to speak to us. It was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Everybody was just so excited about it. And you think all these people have had these experiences, but many of them haven't had them for several years, if they ever had them at all. And it's good to be around other smart people. And we were totally sold out. We had every single tenant represented. So it was great. those are the kind of things that, you know, if we hear about them in the elevator, we can make them happen. And that you couldn't do if you were, you know, not here on the spot, you know, listening and being with the people that are mingling together in our building. So we also had a donor visiting a couple weeks ago. And we walked by a conference room that was full with people, and she said, "Who's in there?" And I said, "Oh, that's Teach for America." So we walked in and we introduced them, and she said, "What are you working on?" And she told her about the tutoring program they were working on. And she said, "I'd like to know more about it." And she just sent me an email and sent an email to the leader of Teach for America that they were making a large commitment to support that program. That was just by a spontaneous walking around. So imagine what can happen. That's why we wanted to bring more people here, more tenants here, because we really knew that we were going to bring donors and we were going to bring community leaders. The mayor's been here 3 or 4 times already. She lives 2 blocks away. We've had many meetings of SLDC, other developers that are working in the community. And we will have, Nina, you asked about other tenants in the Venture Cafe idea that we're coming up with. I think it's going to be called Dialogues on Delmar or something like that. We're going to totally the community will be invited. So it's not going to be limited at all, but the day-to-day programs that we have are focused on our tenants who pay us the rent and who we want to make sure are getting their money's worth.
That's good. And can you talk a little bit about, and maybe I don't know if you guys noticed, I had internet issues and I came back, so I missed a little bit. But did you talk a little bit about your challenges with all of this initially and your pushback and some of the personal challenges you spoke to Susan and I about?
The challenges have been, you know, like what everybody comes up against, money, which is one challenge. I thought that at first, you know, with the building, we had an estimate on the building that was significant because it was a historic building and we were going to restore it. But COVID came along and upped that ante about 25%. So we weren't really planning for that. It's also a really old building. And so there were many, many things that were just sort of cut and pasted together. As long as it was a hospital, they knew where every, you know, corner and where everything was pasted together, but we didn't know. And so when we got hold of the building, we found some interesting things behind walls that we didn't know existed. A significant amount of asbestos, even in a hospital. That was what was used for paint and used for adhesives and all kinds of things. So that was a significant over budget item, was the remediation in the building of all kinds of things. We also, there were 2 morgues and they didn't close the morgues up properly. They just closed the doors one day and left, like it looked like at the end of the Holocaust to me, but they, you know, they had to be reclosed up to new standards. The columns in the building there were tons and tons of columns because they made all these floors. And so the columns are no longer considered made to standard. So we had to, you know, make sure every column was fortified. That is a really expensive proposition. And then it also changes sight lines and it does all kinds of things that, you know, we hadn't really planned for. So the apartments had to totally be relaid out so that the columns weren't a negative, that they were a positive. And that, you know, you don't anticipate that happening. That's all part of the contingency that went very quickly. But we've raised a significant amount of community money. The project is financed through historic tax credits, new market tax credits, a bank loan with Midland States Bank, which I love Midland States Bank. I highly, highly, highly love these people. They've been so wonderful to work with. And then private donations. And at first everybody I thought it would be easy. You know, I could go to 10 people, 9 other people besides myself and get $2 million from them. And at first that was pretty easy until we got to COVID, and then it was really hard. So we're doing, you know, really well on our fundraising. And now that people can see it, they believe it. I think that was another problem too, is people weren't sure this would really ever happen. And now that they can see it and walk through it, they believe it. And, you know, one of the things that's a relic in this building, and we saved it, was the original donor wall to the hospital. And some of the same names that are on that donor wall are donors to our building today. And they would have shown you and made you feel really good about the generation after generation of companies that supported St. Louis institutions were alive and well in this building and have continued to be of some support, some more than others. But I think now that people believe it, and when they come here, all of our tenants have had board meetings in our building. Everyone loves it because they're not sitting on the floor or sitting on broken chairs, that the technology works, that we have phenomenal technology. Everybody feels really, I think feels really proud of what's possible when we all work together. And I think that's something that we have to continue to do in everything we do. I remember when Susan and I talked about years ago, the back to school and how many people were doing back to school fairs and how do we get them, coordinated, and of course, leave it to Susan. We ended up, and she led it, but I think Allie from our team works on it, is, we pulled together all the people that work on back to school fairs to see if we can make them more impactful for the children that we're trying to help. And that's what we need to do more of. And I hope the Delmar DivINe will be a place that people can come and have those meetings and talk about what they can do together for a better St. Louis.
Amazing. And so just a general question, are there any words of advice? You're such a mentor to women in general. Do you have any advice for people that have ambitions to go into business or work in industry that's predominantly males? Mm-hmm. Any advice you have?
I spend about 25% of my time still with entrepreneurs. And I think that is the exciting part of St. Louis. That's such a big opportunity. Number one, we're in the center of the country. So if you're making something, you can ship it from here really, really easily and quickly. That we have so much talent waiting to be discovered or waiting to be inspired. So many children that are incredibly talented. What I did, we have a lot of hallways here in this hospital. I went out to the schools and asked them, the high schools, to provide art that I could buy for our students. If you'll see it when you come. It is unbelievable what these kids are capable. They didn't draw it for Delmar DivINe. They just made this art for themselves or for their school project. Unbelievable talent. If we can rope that talent in to whatever their dreams are, and it not necessarily to just be an artist, but to be a designer, an urban planner, an engineer, who knows? We will be one of the most successful cities in the country. And I went to school in Georgia. I went to the University of Georgia. And yes, we could set up a tour for sure. I went to the University of Georgia, and in Atlanta, which was a overgrown farm town when I left in 1970, is now a town of 5 or 6 million people. And St. Louis was bigger than Atlanta when I came to St. Louis. And now look at the difference. We could be the Atlanta of the Midwest if we value all of our citizens and the talent that exists in our schools and communities equally, or really actually accentuate their talents, because they're phenomenal. So I have a young friend. I just like to tell this story because she's so wonderful. I met her when she was a freshman at Princeton University. She's from Baltimore. And she always wanted to open up a platform for African artists. She was born in Cameroon. And after she graduated from Princeton, she went off to Africa to do this. And she found a factory where she designed, she said, will you make me a handbag if I design it? And they said, sure. And they made her 200 handbags. The next day, she put it on an Instagram page. She opened up a Shopify account and put the handbags out for sale and sold them in 24 hours. And she decided that she better go to business school because she was an African-American history major and a women's studies major. And she went and got into Wharton on a full scholarship and opened up this business in 2020, by the way. I should have said that.
Wow.
And the name of the company is Anima Iris, named after, she had to come up with a name. Her best friend and her mother, she put it together. That's how complicated branding is. Anima Iris. And she's done phenomenally well. She just graduated from Wharton. And she knows what her customer wants. And they're beautiful bags. They're not inexpensive. She wants to be the Louis Vuitton luxury brand for the Black consumer. And she's on her way to doing that. She's already doing several $1 million in business while she was going to graduate school. And she's an amazing young woman. I'm trying to get her to come to St. Louis because I think she could ship her product very effectively from here, but it's not easy to get to Senegal where her handbags are made. So she needs to be near Delta Airlines that goes directly to Africa. But that's the kind of situation that, is booming around the country. And we just need to, we have those kids with those talents and ideas right here in St. Louis. We just have to nurture them a little bit and make sure that they have the education to be successful.
Absolutely. And did you want to talk about any of the challenges that you faced as a female or being white for this Delmar DivINe project?
Well, I will say that the neighborhood was very, very nice to me. I don't know what they were thinking because I think that they were very, very hospitable, but mostly they were hospitable to the KIPP school. So I came in through KIPP and everybody was really excited that this empty school building that had formerly been Mitchell School was now going to be filled with children and happy. And then when we had the idea for this and I took it back to them, they kind of looked at me like, are you sure that's like real? Do you know how big that is? And for me, it is 500,000 square feet, but that's only half of a mall. So it didn't seem like that big to me. You know, I just thought, well, that's doable. But when I saw, I was so frustrated by going to so many places to go to one meeting or two meetings or three or four meetings all over St. Louis. Like, why can't we pull everybody together? And so for me, I could see this building becoming something bigger. Still a place of caring. It cared for people for over 100 years, just caring for them in a different way. And so the neighborhood just kind of like, they'd see me at a meeting. I went to every ward meeting. I went to every neighborhood meeting. They'd see me at a meeting and they slowly but surely started inviting me to their weddings and their baby showers. And I would drive in the neighborhood and I'd get a phone call and somebody would say, I hear you're in the neighborhood. They were looking out for me, which is really something important here. And why don't you come over for coffee? And I'd say, okay, I'll be right over. And I'd come over and be invited to somebody's house and into their house, and we'd sit and talk, and they'd tell me the history of their house and unbelievable stories. So I think that mostly people they got to realize I was pretty tenacious and I wasn't giving up. And they were the reason I wasn't giving up, because the more I got to know them and love them, I couldn't let them down. Right. It was about helping nonprofits and making something positive for St. Louis, but it was really more about the neighbors, because so many people had said they were going to do it and didn't. And you probably don't know this, but all of the studies that have been done in St. Louis about whether it's jobs like the St. Louis Workforce 2030 or all the ones previous to it, including the Ferguson report, mostly they were done for, business people, not for the neighbors, not for the neighborhood. Nothing about the trolley reports that they did to build that ridiculous trolley were did they even invite neighbors to come and talk about it? And they think, oh, it's just osmosis. Everybody knew we were having the meetings. They should have come. They didn't know you were having the meetings. And they were in places that weren't necessarily a place they were comfortable in. So I would just say that they've taught me so much. They've loved me big time. I think also, Build-A-Bear doesn't hurt. Everybody knows about Build-A-Bear. They know about teddy bears. Their children and grandchildren went to Build-A-Bear. So that was an opening for me. They realized I couldn't be a bad person if I was the teddy mama bear, So I had a lot of things going for me, but mostly I had this incredible neighborhood, which was once very prosperous, wanting to come back from the dead, or before it died, coming back strongly, and that they just were doing a lot of things in their neighborhood together, but they weren't getting anywhere, because it takes more than just wanting to do it. It takes it takes a village of giant size to take a historic building and convert it into something meaningful. So we're on our way. The neighbors have many people have told me their housing values are already going up. We want to be careful about that, because we don't want people to leave that live there unless they want to sell their house. Mm-hmm. But we're really excited about what we've been able to accomplish so far.
Karen Tabak had her hand up. I don't know if she wants to ask the question directly to you, Maxine.
Go ahead, Karen.
So that really was one of my questions, was related to housing in the area, and if there's work toward helping owners in the area renovate and update their homes.
Well, there are programs now. The mayor has put in, since she came into office, some amazing programs. And the young man, Neil Richardson, who's head of SLDC, there's a whole committee, and you've probably heard about it, people working on north of Delmar, putting in a whole community development office at the former Sumner, still Sumner High School, and a section of Sumner High School, economic development going on all over the city. So yes, Kevin Bryant, who you saw in that video, is a good friend of mine now. Pastor Andre Alexander, who is working in the Penrose neighborhood, which is right behind Beaumont High School, Susan. There's all these people working together, and we meet together. I'm so much younger, so much older, than all these people, but they just let me in. And it's like really we have a lot of fun together, and we're really working together to make sure that if we know about some incentive that's coming along, that if I don't need it, and I don't, we'll send it to them. And we brought developers from Kansas City to meet with them in November. It was a really wonderful opportunity. So it's a big, it's a big teddy bear kind of thing. It's a way, it's a similar thing. Hugging a neighborhood is not that much different than hugging a child, except it's a lot bigger and it has a lot bigger impact. And I think we have a lot of work to do to make up for lost time in St. Louis. But I did see a question about security. Let me tell you a really quick story that, first of all, we have not had any security issues. We have 24/7 security guards, but that's not the reason. Our parking lot that we have that's right next to it, a low-income housing project. When we bought the property, that parking lot was cracked. It was disgusting, dirty, awful. And the neighbors that were in this low-income housing project were mad because their trash cans were always full. They just threw the trash in the parking lot. We fixed up our parking lot last spring, and there hasn't been not one piece of trash thrown from any of those apartments into our parking lot. So the broken windows theory is alive and well in this neighborhood. And people are so proud, they will not send a piece of trash. They look out for us. They're excited to see the landscaping going in now because it's just been a dust ball for 2 years as they've been doing the construction. Everybody's really excited about this important piece of property, beautifying their neighborhood as well as making it bring in taxes and revenue and people. The other thing is that there is power in numbers, and people are parking lots full every day, so people don't bother. Right behind us is a low-income project that was built probably in like 2017, long after I bought the property. And it's fantastic. And those neighbors are volunteering to come and read to children in our community room. They want to know, what can we do? How can we help? How can we participate? So I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm certainly not afraid of my neighbors. The neighbors are so excited they just drop in sometimes. And we have a great person at our front desk, and she sits and talks, and it's just amazing. The whole thing is beyond my wildest expectations for community, not just the community that we're building with the nonprofits, but what we're doing for the neighborhood of 63112, the West End of St. Louis.
That's amazing. And before I end, does anyone else, I just want to make sure that I get to any questions that anyone else might have for Maxine. I don't see any more in the chat. But Susan and I, everyone's saying thank you. Susan and I, we always ask our special guests this one question. I know I'm going to assume what the answer is going to be, but we always ask, what's something that you're most proud of all of your endeavors? Maxine.
Oh gosh, these are hard ones.
You have a lot of endeavors.
This project is, people ask me, compare this to Build-A-Bear, and there really is a lot of comparisons, but I would say that this project was much harder than starting Build-A-Bear and growing Build-A-Bear to 500 stores around the world. This is much harder. It shouldn't be.
Right.
Making your neighborhood safer, better, more prosperous should be, easy peasy work. But I'm proud that I was able to get it done, almost done. It's as close to, really close to done now. You can really see it. And I believe that it just takes one. And now that one person did it, other people will do it and believe that it's possible. And I think that's the best legacy I can leave to St. Louis, is that it is possible for a woman 4'10" and over 70 when I started on this project, or over 65 for sure when I started on this project, that you're never too old to have a happy childhood, to have a really successful project, to contribute to your community. I think that's another message. I don't talk about it often because, I sometimes have to remind myself of my age, but I would say that, it is never too late to do something really meaningful and continue to do it in whatever way you're capable of doing, participating. And I am honored to have been able to complete this project in my lifetime and hopefully see it for a much longer time to come.
We are so thankful for you too, Maxine. And one more question, well, two questions. Is the Child Care Center coming, and what is your next project?
A child care center we're working on that may be in phase 2. One of the people, I'm really close to a lot of child care developers, people that own child care centers, and their biggest challenge right now is staffing. Even if I gave them free rent, they couldn't staff it. And so that's a whole nother, challenge that we're working on. What was the second part of the question?
Do you have a next project?
One of the things that really interests me in this neighborhood, there are tons of churches, and many of those churches were synagogues, by the way. Wow. Right across the street from us is Grace and Priest Presbyterian Church. It was, I believe, B'nai El at one time. And down on de Bolivar, there's a Baptist church that was a synagogue. But most of them don't have any, very many members anymore. And so what are we going to do to rethink about our beautiful houses of worship that were in St. Louis? I think, you know, on Kings Highway, one of the churches there across from something that was a synagogue is going to be the Gospel Hall of Fame, which is a perfect use for a church. But what are we going to do with all these pieces of wonderful property? So I'm kind of thinking about that as maybe a how to rethink them for maybe wedding venues, apartments, you know, what's possible besides tearing them down, because they're just beautiful. And St. Louis had, you know, on the north-south streets, had, you know, so many houses of worship for different people, and we shouldn't let them fall apart. We could reuse them. So that's kind of one of the things that's on my back burner after the Early Childhood Center.
Right, you have a lot to do. Yeah. And thank you so much for being here with us, Maxine. I know you're so busy, and to show our appreciation, we are sponsoring a child in your name for our back to school program, which helps 2,000 kids get ready for school. And that's going to be on July 31st this year. So
where's it going to be this year? Where is it this year?
It's going to be at Temple Israel, where people were basically whatever is going to be given to the kids will be picked up and delivered to the agencies it's going to be hybrid. Thank you, Ellen. Delivery. Yeah, we can't do our traditional in-person quite yet, back to school stores, but hopefully next year or thereafter we'll be able to do it. And so thank you. And our next coffee talk is Tuesday, June 28th, and we're going to have Polly Blitzer. She was a beauty editor for several magazines. She's a blogger, she's a writer, and she's kind of our inside guide to the beauty brands. So be sure to join us in June. And thank you again, Maxine, and thank you everyone for being here. We appreciate you.